Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new edition of The Explainer. So think about this. Last year, nearly 1 in 5 cars sold globally was electric. That's huge. We have officially moved way past the novelty phase of EVs. But making electric mobility a practical, everyday reality for billions of people, well, that requires a massive, coordinated effort. Today, we're going to break down the global regulations, the hardware breakthroughs, and the local, on-the-ground shifts that are literally dismantling the final hurdles of the EV revolution. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at standardizing the EV grid. Then, the next-gen battery leap. Third, building the EV spine. Fourth, power on wheels and fleets. And finally, financing the energy transition. But before we really get into the heavy lifting, I want you to ask yourself, what is the biggest roadblock to going electric? Think about your own personal reservations, or maybe the arguments you hear from friends and family. For most of us, it usually boils down to a few very common fears, right? Range anxiety, the stress of actually finding a compatible charger, and the sheer amount of time it takes to charge up compared to just pumping gas. Hold on to those thoughts, because as you'll see, we're about to explore exactly how those specific fears are being systematically eliminated. Let's start with number 1, standardizing the EV grid and the rules for a seamless network. To really understand the global charging picture, we've got to look at how the European Union is solving this on a macro level. This brings us to a very important, if slightly intimidating acronym, AFIR. It stands for the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation. I know, it sounds incredibly bureaucratic, but this is essentially the rulebook uniting European nations toward a climate-neutral 2050. And here's the thing. This directive isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's a binding mandate designed to forcefully increase the frequency and accessibility of EV charging options across the entire European Union. And this brilliantly simple analogy from the e-mobility platform Spirii illustrates why AFR is so desperately needed. Imagine if every airport in the world operated independently, right? With entirely different standards for runways, communications, and safety. Logistically, global air travel simply couldn't exist. It would be chaos. Well, that fragmented reality is exactly what the early days of EV charging looked like. AFR's push to standardize EV chargers is literally the only way to make streamlined, worry-free long-distance electric travel viable across borders. To actually enforce this, the EU has set some hard targets, specifically 60 kilometers. By the year 2025, AFAR mandates that a fast charger with a minimum capacity of 150 kilowatts must be available every 60 kilometers along Europe's major motorways. That means a driver will never be more than a short hop away from a high-speed charge. But here is the absolutely crucial part. It's not just about dumping more hardware onto the side of the road. It's about having smarter chargers. Any chargers built after April 2024 must be capable of smart recharging. To distribute power efficiently, they need open APIs to communicate with the grid and roaming networks. Most importantly, they have to empower the driver. We're talking real-time availability data, transparent pricing, no mandatory subscriptions, and no hidden roaming fees when you cross a border. Imagine that. You just plug in, tap your card, and go. Moving on to Section 2, the next-gen battery leap, where hardware meets the challenge. So how is the physical hardware actually meeting these new standards? Well, at their recent Super Technology Day, battery giant CATL unveiled a massive strategic shift toward a multi-chemistry approach. On one hand, you've got the condensed battery. This is an aerospace-inspired marvel with an energy density of 350 watt-hours per kilogram, built for ultra-high performance. On the other hand, you have the sodium-ion or Naxtra battery. This one is built for the mass market. It's cost-effective, scales easily, relies on highly stable raw materials to avoid those pesky supply chain bottlenecks, and is slated for mass production by late 2026. CATL is proving that to really win the EV race, you need tailored hardware for both the luxury long haulers and the everyday commuter. But wait, let's circle back to that condensed battery for a second, because the performance numbers here are just staggering. With that density, this battery can provide a jaw-dropping range of over 1,000 kilometers on a single charge for large SUVs. Let that sink in. You could drive for 10 hours straight, honestly, long past the point where you'd need to pull over for a coffee, before the car even needs a recharge. That breakthrough directly and unequivocally eliminates the whole concept of range anxiety. All right, Section 3, building the EV spine. Let's take a look at ground-level implementation. So we've got global rules and we've got incredible batteries. But what about the on-the-ground reality? Over in the Philippines, Carla Buencamino from ACM Mobility describes their mission perfectly. She says they are building the Philippine EV spine. Along with Shell, ACM Mobility has officially opened 8 new DC fast charging hubs in strategic locations completely outside of Metro Manila. They are actively connecting major destinations across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And they definitely aren't stopping at 8. They're scaling this up to 50 Shell locations featuring over 100 charge points nationwide. What's brilliant here is how much it actually mirrors the goals of AFIRE over in Europe. These stations are placed strategically along major highways, meaning worry-free long-distance EV drives are becoming a reality locally. Plus, it's all integrated into AC Mobility's Evro app, giving drivers the exact transparency and frictionless digital payment experience that those global standards are pushing for. That brings us to Section 4, Power on Wheels and Fleets, seeing the ecosystem in action. Now, what do you do when a fixed highway hub just isn't enough for a business? Enter AC Mobility's Power on Wheels, or POW. Think of it kind of like Uber Eats, but for high-speed electricity. These are 120 kilowatt-hour mobile DC fast chargers that can literally be rolled right up to businesses, residential condos, or fleet depots. It delivers on-demand power without a company needing to spend heavily on permanent construction or extensive electrical retrofitting. It literally meets the businesses exactly where they operate. When you combine that kind of mobile flexibility with smart software, you get a real working ecosystem. Take a Grab taxi driver today, for example. They finish a shift and drop off their EV at a designated facility. Next, the car charges seamlessly, utilizing the Evro app to automatically allocate digital credits. So no manual tracking, no annoying fuel cards. Then, the next driver simply picks up the fully charged car. Zero downtime, zero scheduling overlap, and the driver's livelihood is protected from volatile fuel markets. It's a game changer. Finally, Section 5, Financing the Energy Transition. Let's look at how we're fueling this revolution. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does all this incredible green infrastructure actually get funded? Well, the answer lies in the most exciting place possible: corporate governance paperwork. Specifically, this SEC Form 20-IS filed by ACN Corporation. While it might just look like standard legalese, amending Article 2 to expand their primary purpose into power generation is exactly the structural pivot required to funnel billions into the vast renewable rollouts we've been exploring today. And to execute that expanded scope, they need capital. Serious capital. To put this in perspective, ACN is proposing to amend Article 7 to increase its authorized capital stock from 48.4 billion all the way up to 58.4 billion pesos. By creating these additional common shares, they are building the massive financial war chest required to fund this green tech revolution right from the ground up. We started today's explainer by asking about roadblocks. But as we've seen, with batteries crossing 1,000 kilometers, mobile chargers that literally roll right up to your office door, and global legally binding standards locking in a seamless, transparent network, those hurdles are actively disappearing. So, with all of this infrastructure and technology rapidly falling into place, how will this change your next vehicle purchase? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.